I'm sure more people will join in as we get started. But for those that are participating, there's 3 questions on the screen right now. If you want to input that into chat, this will help our panelists understand where you're coming from, understand your background a bit. So when we do answer these questions that are coming up, it's more tailored to your experience. Education. So answering these questions will help our panelists know kind of where you're at and help us tailor the panelist questions as we go along to help support you in this AI journey. So feel free to put that in the chat and we'll follow along as we go through. So the message is pinned. So if you joined later and you don't see the pinned message, let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Anybody can respond. You can do thumbs up reaction. But can you guys see the pinned message in the chat? Okay, cool. So housekeeping rules, any burning questions that you may have, feel free to just add them in the chat. We'll either respond to them during that part of the conversation or at the end. Unless you're speaking, please keep yourself muted. This is going to be recorded and published on YouTube channel. You're welcome to use the chat only. You're welcome to come off the mic and ask your questions. Stay off camera. Just do whatever it is that you're comfortable with when it comes to the Q&A section. And then at the end, when you want to ask a question, feel free to use the raise hand features in case we have multiple questions. Our panelists will love your participation, so use the chat for any comments throughout. I'll do my best to bring them into the conversation as needed and or use the reactions because it's always fun seeing the little emojis coming in and out. Quick thing about the organization, we are the Lioness Instincts. Our mission is to empower women to protect themselves in our physical and digital worlds through providing education such as webinars like this and in-person self-defense. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, thanks to be physically sponsored by the Hack Club Bank. Here are some social media that you can connect with us. Tomorrow we have a gaming panel at 12 p.m. Eastern. This would also be recorded and published on YouTube. And then next Wednesday on the 25th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, we have a kind of a family safety and exploitations based on our digital space conversation, where we'll dive into additional conversations about kid safety, domestic violence, trafficking, and all these different risks that we have when it comes to these online spaces. For those that are watching, if you want some online safety resources, you can find it at the lionessinstincts.com/online safety resource. It's a 8-page document with different tips and tricks where you're traveling, social media, dating, your business, or just keeping kids safe online, and who to contact if something unfortunately were to happen. And then this is different ways to keep in touch with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can email us or check us out on the calendar. So with that, we'll start our conversation, and I'm going to start with Denzel. I want just the panelists to introduce themselves. We have Denzel, we have Jay, we have Aria.
Great. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. Okay. So thanks for letting me participate and for the intro. My name is Denzel Cadet. I am a New Yorker, although I'm physically in LA right now. Grew up in New York, went to Princeton for undergrad, NYU for law school. And then I started practicing at a big, international Wall Street firm for a while, doing private equity, helping businesses raise money and then buy and sell companies. I then rotated over to a Silicon Valley tech law firm where I got a lot more exposure to venture capital, tech, and working with startups. And for the last 5 or 6 years, although really I think the last 2 is where we found our stride, I've run Cadet Legal, which is a firm that focuses on all the things that I started out my career doing. We just focus on small businesses and startups. And so this issue, this idea of AI, of artificial intelligence, comes up in our work in multiple ways. It comes up because as a small business owner and operator, we look to use AI to improve our own operations safely, and help provide efficiency to our clients. But also we're advising clients very directly who are either using AI in their own small business or startup, or directly developing their own AI tools. And shout out to, I see my colleague Anu Kanal is here. He and I work together with a lot of startup founders who are developing their own AI. So happy to talk and bring a bit of the legal perspective, but also a little bit of the business perspective of practical use of AI as we use it both in our own business, the law firm, and also in our client's business. Thank you.
Jay?
Hey, can you all hear me? Perfect. How's everyone doing today? So my name is Jay Malachi, and my background is in financial operations and process design, where I've spent the last several years improving workflows, building internal documentation systems, and also increasing operational clarity in complex organizations. I'm also the founder of Trust Release Allow, which is a human-centered practice, and it's focused on helping individuals and organizations navigate trust, responsibility, and decision-making in an AI-driven world. So my work centers on the core question of, as technology becomes more powerful, how do we remain intentional, ethical, and human in how we build and use it? So the perspective that I bring today is about clarity and accountability, and making sure AI isn't just used, but it's leveraged responsibly.
Thank you both. And Aria?
Hi, I am Ara Galarza. I currently lead AI at a company called Direct Meds, it's a pharmaceutical tech company, and I'm also founder and consultant at Mass Labs. I build AI systems, right, inside regulated environments. And I'm really excited about this panel because my lens is primarily infrastructure and governance, and it's something a lot of people don't really think about when they're interacting with AI today. So naturally, I'm highly technical. I have a design spirit, but I truly enjoy making AI understandable in a way that sticks and provides ongoing insight and really guiding people to use it in the right way. So what interests me about AI is, or the most, is that it's not just what AI can generate, but how the systems are trained, right? How the data flows through them, and how we design accountability into the process from the start and really inject ourselves into the life cycle. I'm very much looking forward to having this discussion with you because people are very excited about the immediate gratification of creating images that look like them in a caricature way, right? That's the latest thing. Make me look like a character at work. But where's that data coming from? How is that data being used? And how do you protect yourself responsibly and do it in a responsible and informed way beyond knowing how to create a project and add prompts and add rules, right? How do you create yourself as the true source, the true source of truth, as you build, as you incorporate AI into your day-to-day life. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually fell for the caricature trend, but when I asked it to make it, it's like, can you please upload a selfie? And I was like, I think not. I was like, just generate an image. Let's set up a nice little baseline for our audience, right? You know, everybody has a different perspective of what AI is. You know, those that aren't in the tech industry, I've just watched the news. I hear a lot about like these robots are going to take over it versus those that use it every day just have this like general understanding or like a baseline understanding of what AI is. So let's set the stage for it. Jay, we'll start with you. Just explain to the audience just a basic understanding of what AI is. Like, how are we going to have moving forward in this conversation? How should we imagine or understand AI?
Got you. So AI is everywhere. It's implemented in many different systems that we use today that we tend to overlook. And so one of the main things that I focused on recently is the LLM systems, large language models. And it's basically information that's uploaded, and it takes that information and you ask a question and it's predictive information. It's predicting what comes next. It's not always the right thing. Sometimes there's hallucinations, but it's predictive language.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, it's just a good start and good explanation. Aria, when I met you, I know you spent many years in this historical context of AI. So continue on like understanding what AI is and explaining to our audience. I would love your perspective of this like historical context and evolution of AI.
It's AI. I like to describe as the output, right? The outcome. There's a lot that's happening under the hood. I mentioned this in my intro. Machine learning is where I started to get my my chops in AI, and this was about eight to 10 years ago, maybe about 10 years ago. And what does that entail? Taking a piece of data and defining it. That's that, and then being able to. And how do you define it? You can't have paragraphs and sentences. You need to have what's called tags or metadata, right? To really establish what the life cycle of that data point will, or a data set, right? If they're like pieces, like data, what does that life cycle look like, and how is it going to be consumed? So the evolution piece is that we are now in a place where many people and organizations are bypassing the training aspect. They're jumping right into large language models that are developed by the masses and miss the validation, right? The human in the loop piece, where folks are leveraging artificial intelligence to drive their workflows, to help them write better essays, to help them write better love stories and poems, just as Valentine's Day is passing on. But how do you know that's the right way to approach it if you're not really putting yourself into it? So the machine learning aspect, and really, again, training the data to represent the definition that you give it. So today, some companies are doing it right. Some organizations are allowing people to train the model, use machine learning to refine the output of AI. Again, the endpoint, the outcome. But there are a lot of other organizations and tools that don't allow you to do that. There's a lot of assumption and hallucinations, and we don't double check our work. Whereas the machine learning or even data science, which is, it's not a dying craft. It's just automated a bit more today, right? We still need our scientists to do the math behind the scenes and make sense of it all, because the machine will cap out. The machine, I don't believe, will ever have the creative capacity of a human. And the role is not to replace people. It's to use people to shape the way AI exists in our day-to-day life. And that's the evolution that I'm excited about, from being under the hood and people not really understanding how it works to, okay, I can create a prompt, to understanding how the machine works with you. And I'll be a bit of a broken record about it. It's a lot simpler than what we make it. I hope that answers your question a bit. Starting under the hood, then you come up the level, looking at the data, you're grouping the data after it's been defined. Where's the data going? No one talks about it. Let's talk about AI, right? And LLMs. And LLMs, a large language model, is essentially just a model with definitions and a bunch of text.
Yeah, when I first learned about AI, they just said it's a bunch of scripts. That's all it is. It's a brain, it's a database, and a bunch of scripts.
Yeah.
So that's a thank you for that insight. Denzel, you work on a daily with a bunch of clients that, use AI in all different forms, I'm sure. I would love to have your perspective of the understanding of AI, an explanation of what it is, and how have you seen these companies use it on a kind of like a day-to-day aspect?
Yeah, great question. So one, completely agree with kind of the definitions and especially, the technical definition that Ari just gave, very helpful. So to give my kind of simplified definition of AI, I would say, it's a tool. It's a tool. And the reason I define it that way is because there are mixed feelings about AI. I imagine even on, people attending this panel, I know that my fellow panelists and I, are generally engaged with AI and using it with guidelines, but, the public at large and people who are curious, there's a mixed bag. There are people who use AI for everything, right? They use AI to pick their cereal in the morning, to pick their outfit, to plan their day. No, seriously. They talk to AI and, as if it's a person, right? They literally say please and thank you to the AI, which as an aside actually makes the process slower. But, there are people who love AI. AI is literally their best friend, right? In extreme version, we see people, in dangerous scenarios falling in love with their AI chatbot, right? So there's one extreme of everyone, I love AI. AI is actually a person and my friend. The other extreme, which you'll see, whether it's, older people, some of my older relatives, for example, I have a Haitian background. And so some of my older relatives are a bit more skeptical of the technology, or even other attorneys like myself, whether they're at really big firms like I used to be, or they're at, boutiques that like Anu and I run. There's another extreme of AI is the devil. I'm terrified of AI. We're going to end up with chips in our head and the machines running the world, in part because of that first guy who thought AI was his friend. And so, why I started with AI as a tool is because I think the truth, as with all extreme situations and all polarizing topics, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And the truth is that, as Ara technically defined it, and as Jay was talking about, he uses it, it's a tool. So like any tool, a knife, it can be used to help and to heal, or it can be used to destroy. It's the same with AI, and it's what we're seeing in our work. It's also what we're seeing as far as, whether it is the layperson who's using AI and it's helping them, get organized. A practical example, my mom, I'm the oldest of 9 kids. My mom now finally is done raising kids. My youngest sister is 17. And so now she's trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with this second act? She's very into midwifing and birthing, as you might imagine. And so one of the things we did with AI was, hey, if for someone who has these, 9 kids and all this experience with natural childbirth, put together a learning plan for this person to figure out, the best steps to become a doula, right? And in a few seconds, it gave my mom a really great kind of learning plan for her to now figure out how to pursue her second act as a layperson. But, we also see people mess up with AI, and it's not just lay people, right? It's attorneys. We see attorneys who are using AI in their work. Anu and I use AI in our work, but we do it very carefully because you can get in trouble. As one of the panelists mentioned, AI has a tendency to hallucinate. And so if you're using AI for the work product at your job, I'll pick on my own profession. There are lawyers who use AI to generate, the documents that they file in court, or even to draft contracts. And AI, remember, it's a tool. So it's a tool that you need to understand. It pulls data, information from other places and spits it out. Sometimes it'll pull from places that are not appropriate, that are not good sources, or sometimes on the output side, it'll spit out outputs that are actually hallucinations that aren't true. And, using it, whether you are a layperson or you are a professional using AI, and I just gave 2 extremes, you have to realize it's a tool. And so the number one lesson here, and what we start with all our clients is, what is AI, right? What is it? And it's a tool for dealing with data, sorting it, managing it, analyzing it, repurposing it, and spitting it out into something new. And that applies to whether it's, words, sounds, or images. It's a tool, but there are certain risks. And so wherever you fall on the spectrum, we like to start with, this is a tool. Let us know what your goals are, and then we'll figure out, whether AI is the appropriate tool for you. And if so, how do we actually implement that into your business or into your daily life?
I want to add to the tool and setting goals right there. That's a key element, right? What is your intention? Set the intention. You have an intention in every tool that you use, every product that you buy, every shoe that you purchase. Is it not? Right? What difference is it with a tool in for AI? And I really like that you provide an example on how to create a guidebook, for example, or a playbook for being a doula. And I'm sure your mom read through it to see whether or not it's in line with how she practices being a doula. And there's a response. That's the human responsibility piece. Sure, she can take it and run, read it later on the spot with someone, or repeat verbatim as a script to people she's interacting with, and in the middle of it catch herself, kind of like the M dash when you're publishing a letter or an essay or an article at the New York Times. So I just saw something about that yesterday. But the point is inserting yourself in that human, in the loop process, making sure that you're validating what's being provided to you. The dependency, reducing the dependency on the robot and being true about your intention, the robot, the agent or chatbot. Being very clear about what you want to accomplish and what that goal is, and sticking to that goal. Because if you overload your chatbot or your AI tool with too many prompts or asks, it's going to get confused. It's important to be explicit and then create associations. So I appreciate the example on that, taking the extra steps.
Yeah, definitely great examples and conversation there. Denzel, you mentioned something very particular, and I think it was kind of like the start and one of the reasons we wanted to host this panel. Excuse my cat, Morty. He's just attached to me. It's like the minute you're on a meeting, Mom, I got to be on your lap. Was the relationship people are having with AI. So, Jay, we'll start with you, but I would love your perspective on, AI's role in the social media, the implications of privacy, and this like different influence that AI has been having on these different age groups, especially kids, or just those that aren't familiar or with like mental health issues, or the loneliness that people may feel. I would love your thoughts around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just speaking to the loneliness as well as social media. So in regards to loneliness, since COVID, there's been somewhat of a loneliness epidemic as far as people needing somebody to talk to. And I've found and I've noticed, just seeing on social media in general, how many people do go to, ChatGPT or Claude to talk through and process certain experiences. And I've been reading more and more in the media how different conversations are either leading to some type of mental health issues, where people aren't getting the support they need because they're talking to, the chatbot, which again can hallucinate. Another thing it can do is it can tell you what you want to hear. It's built because it wants you to continue to come back. So a lot of times it's spitting out information that isn't always true. And on top of that, if you're listening to it and you're really taking it to heart, depending on the mental health state that you're in, it can really change your perspective and lead to drastic situations. One of the things that Denzel touched on was, again, when we go back to him talking about his mom being a doula and creating that doula script or prompt and reviewing that, and then Ari coming back and saying she was able to read that information and say like whether it's correct or not, or whether it coincides with what she believes or not. Sometimes people are putting in information or asking questions and not even realizing that they're receiving hallucinations. So they're taking this information and they're utilizing it, not realizing that you probably just got the wrong information and it's probably not going to get you the outcome that you're actually looking for. Another thing that I found on social media as well is everybody in this day and age, we're trying to make money, right? So it's easy to go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, can you create a business for me? I'm trying to make this much money in this amount of time. And so you all have probably seen it too on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, different people with different programs or different things they're selling now that are all ChatGPT or LLM created. And the information is either completely wrong or it's partway wrong and you don't really know, but you're still paying for it and accessing it, not realizing how it's impacting you because people aren't taking the time to actually review the information. So one of the things that, when I talk with different people or some of my clients, I talk to them about, are you using AI? Or are you leveraging AI? Because from my perspective, that's two different things. Using AI is literally saying, hey, I'm trying to make money. I don't really know a lot about this thing, but if I put it in here and you spit out a prompt and some information, I'm gonna just use that. Versus, doing what Ari was talking about, having that critical thinking piece, the piece of, do you have information or knowledge of what it is you're already looking into? And can you go back and correct and ask additional questions? So one of the things that I think is really important is to make sure that you realize you're only going to get out of the LLM or the chatbot what you put into it. So when you're using AI in that way, it's based on the questions that you're asking, how you're prompting these questions, because there's a specific way that you can go about asking to get better insider information versus just using it like Google, which is what a lot of people tend to do. And so there's a lot of things that it's so new. You know, a lot of people are like, AI is moving so fast. We're still in the pre-stages of AI and everything that's being created. Every month, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of new AI tools being created. And we still are learning what this really means. So those are definitely things I think, you know, that I tend to think about when it comes to AI.
Then Ari, do you want to jump in?
I wanted to add, I was thinking about the tooling and how, you know, AI's impact on social media, and thinking about pattern recognition, right? And people who build a relationship with ChatGPT, and then they have an AI companion. But I want to go back and state that I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that AI is just a tool. It's an infrastructure layer. And that's one of the things I'm focused on at whether it's an organization or at an individual level. It's an infrastructure layer where it learns from data patterns. And that means your behavior, your language, your interactions, you checking it, telling it it's wrong. Do not yes me. Honor the contract. You establish a contract with it can really shape how they respond. And which leads to my next point, right? How does that translate into social media? And it in and of itself is passive data collection. Whether you're using ChatGPT or you're using an AI tool within, let's say, Instagram to generate your post, which has very little visibility into your patterns. The social, the productivity aspect of it, and even the devices that you're using are constantly generating or looking for behavioral signals, and they don't always talk to each other. What you're doing on your phone with Siri or ChatGPT doesn't necessarily have the context is non-existent in the Claude or in Meta, right? So you are that glue. The organizations are that glue, and one of the things we're doing at Direct Meds is having creating a continuity across different departments using a single service. Right now, a couple of departments are using 2 different services and independent services outside of the to help them with some questions, like Google, for example. And my role is to establish an ecosystem that creates that establishes trust and understands the patterns that are unique to that individual, their team, their department, and then the greater organ, ultimately how we support our patients. So I think folks really underestimate the digital footprint from something as simple as or as obvious as Instagram, all the way down to how they transcribe an email on a Monday morning. So
Agreed.
You are the
Agreed.
guy.
And
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I would say, I think, you know, or I agree completely. It's a tool, but it's, you know, what a tool it is. It's a tool, but it's not just a tool. And I think it's, you know, if we want to use analogies from history, you know, there have been various things that are pretty, you know, much more simple even than AI. And like, you can call them just a tool or object, but they actually kind of changed everything: economies, governments, politics. So the wheel, right? It's just the tool, but it changed everything. You know, the internet, right? Probably the closest, you know, most recent analogy. And if you think about the internet, you know, I'm old enough to remember the world before the internet. And, you know, a lot of the fears about safety that we have with AI now are echo the ones that people had in the past with the internet. You know, whether it's with children and, you know, the risk to them, whether it's to children and adults, and, you know, the mental toll, right? Oh, you're going to use the internet, you're not going to think on your own anymore. Does that sound familiar? And so, yeah, it's a tool, but to Ara's point, part of why, despite the risk, which I want to talk about really briefly, kind of 3 distinct buckets of risk, despite the risk, I and my colleagues are very, you know, optimistic about AI because we see its potential that it's not just a tool, but to Ara's point, it can be the basis of operational infrastructure for businesses, and especially for small businesses and startups, where they may be able to unlock potential that they wouldn't have beforehand, assuming that they're able to integrate AI and the infrastructure with human involvement in a very comprehensive and strategic way. And that's part of, Ara's work and part of what, we help advise clients to do. And we look at it from a legal perspective, because there are risks, right? I mentioned risk in kind of 3 distinct buckets of risk. And again, the way that I practice law, the way that I work with clients and my approach to AI is not a risk-based approach. It's very much a goal-oriented approach, meaning what is your goal? Let's figure out how to get you there. But yes, I am a lawyer, I'm legally trained, and I have a duty to look out for you. So as we get towards that goal, we're going to help you maneuver some of the potholes. Well, there are some common potholes in dealing with AI. We've kind of already mentioned them, but if I had to kind of put them in 3 distinct buckets, I think there's one is a kind of human and individual direct harm. So harm to people, right? Meaning things like, children interacting with AI and falling in love with, a fake Game of Thrones character. That's a real situation. And unfortunately, that young man ended up, taking his own life. There was, on the other end of the spectrum, an older gentleman who might have had some mental health issues, who fell in love with this young, beautiful AI bot. Sadly, he also then, it led him to take dangerous actions that cost him. So there's harm to people in that sense of, the most vulnerable populations. There's also harm to people in the form of deepfakes, revenge porn, also, explicit child content, right? The people can generate that. There are sick people out there. And these are all things that we have dealt with with real clients and real businesses. So as much as we love the benefits and potential benefits to humanity for AI, we think it can be like the internet and the wheel and other things. The internet does have some dark, scary places, right? Some of the other panels are going to talk about that. It does, and AI also does, and I've unfortunately seen them and had to deal with them even in the last few weeks. So we have to be careful about the harm to humans. The second harm is much more relevant to my business clients, and relates to infrastructure, as Ara was talking about. As you incorporate AI into your infrastructure, we focus a lot on, operating your business, even from a legal perspective, making sure that you can avoid risk, but really let's make sure that you can use this tool in your business in a way that helps you. So one of the things that AI is good at is sorting information, right? We mentioned that, sorting data. So we see that, sometimes businesses are using AI in sorting data, and there are good ways to do it and there are bad ways to do it. One of the risks of AI, very specific to businesses, is using AI in hiring and firing decisions, right? Okay, I have a lot of candidates or data, let me sort through. There are risks there because AI has a tendency towards bias, right? It's trained by humans who have bias. It's the data that's input is selected with bias and may have bias. And so the outputs, when you say, for example, I have 50 candidates, scan their resumes, right? That's data, scan them and give me the best candidates for these categories. Things like, I want this GPA or I want this, work experience, probably not as bad because those are objective criteria. But when you start thinking about softer qualities like leadership, recent example, or, judgment, things like that, softer qualities, AI being able to pick out those things for you, there's risk there, and there's actual legal risk to using AI in a biased way in your business, right? And then the last kind of bucket, it's kind of a catch-all bucket, but I like to call it the inputs and output liability problem, period. And so, AI, when you give it a prompt and it pulls information from the internet, it scrapes the internet for data, and then it gives you an output, you need to worry about potential risk in the inputs, the data that was fed in, and risk with the outputs. So risk with the inputs includes intellectual property risk. I say that, again, a shout out to my colleague, Anu Kanal, who has been practicing as an IP attorney for years. If your AI, you're using it to create something new on social media, right? For example, an article, a song, an image even. If your AI is pulling from other people's intellectual property, there's a risk that you could get sued for using their data, their intellectual property in the output that you put out, especially if you're trying to commercialize. There are numerous court cases on that. Similarly, on the output front, and we're thinking on a business level, you have to be careful that you're not relying on AI and ChatGPT too much. I had a funny situation recently where a client was using ChatGPT, attorney at law, to try to tell me how something I mentioned to him was risky to do, how it was okay. And the thing is, I wasn't upset with him because I use AI regularly, but I check it because the outputs at the end of the day, as a human and a business person, attorneys, we have a higher standard of care, but even you as a regular business person, if you're using AI to create deliverables or outputs, there's not just the risk that you're infringing on someone else's intellectual property, but there's risk that the output, the deliverable you gave to someone else for them to rely on, if there's some issue with it, that you're the one that's responsible for it. So there are kind of 3 buckets. And I say all those not to scare you, well, to scare you a bit, but also to say that this is the reason why it's important to use AI in a comprehensive and kind of systematic way, like Ara said, so that you can avoid those risks and unlock all the benefits.
That was powerful right there. Thank you. Let's shift gears we've talked about the harms, we talked about the concerns and the safety, but let's shift gears into those ethical considerations, which is, where Denzel was starting to, you mentioned, the deepfakes, the different relying on it heavily, hiring some misinformation, that critical thinking piece that we were missing, that we're going to be missing because most people just take the content, take the prompt, and just run with it. Jay, we'll start with you. Just want your considerations on misconceptions about AI and the privacy issues behind it.
Alrighty, so regarding AI and the privacy issues behind it, one of the things that came up when Denzel was talking was the thought of kind of back to social media and how there's so much content being pushed now where you don't know if it's real or if it's fake. You don't know, like if you see something, you gotta, check multiple times in different areas just to make sure like the information you're saying is correct, and just how big of an issue that is, not only just for the population and the media is we're trying to get, real information, but also just overall the impacts of that. And so when I think of ethical use, it is having guardrails, it is, doing what Art said, knowing what you're using it for, having an intention behind it, paying attention to, what Denzel said as well, IP information. Where is this information being pulled from? Are you going back? Are you asking, just like when we used to have to write papers in college, you got to cite your sources. So are you looking for AI to cite its sources and checking that information to make sure it's correct? And then you do have the deep fakes as well. And so it's having an awareness of knowing not just the intention of the use, but also reflecting on, what areas you're using it in. And I think also finding ways to check the information. And so sometimes that's as simple as if you know that, for example, ChatGPT, you're asking questions and it's going to tell you what you want to hear. Are you going back and asking it, hey, can you give me the opposite perspective? Can you challenge what you've just told me now? Can you tell me something that I wasn't paying attention to before? Just to get a more granular perspective and understanding. And then, when it comes to ethics, I think there's many different buckets and many different places that you can look at when it comes to the use. So you can look at it from the perspective of individual use. You can also look at it from the perspective of, jobs. Denzel just touched on people applying to jobs and, how the AI systems are pulling candidates or not pulling candidates, or, not really knowing how someone is training or setting up their AI. And again, how that can impact the population, how it can impact people when it comes to the information that they're seeking, the questions that they're asking. But there's so many different places and things to think about when you think about the ethics of who's behind it, the intention behind it, and just taking the time to reflect and ask. Sometimes it's even asking AI, like, is this ethical? Would be an ethical way to ask this question or to move within the space I'm trying to move into, So.
Thank you. Yeah, just sometimes asking to have usually a prompt where it's like, can you validate what you just said to me? Aria? I saw you got off mute.
You know, sometimes I'll even conduct a SWOT analysis against itself, and it's interesting because you'll see where they fall short. And then, like, you know, I'll get into a bit more about the risks and consent, digital consent, but in terms of challenging the system to evaluate itself, right? And seeing those gaps in the dark corners. I would at times take, so ChatGPT, I would consider generally a generalist, the workhorse, right? But they yes me too much. It yeses me. I'm constantly saying, run an analysis against yourself. Where are the gaps? And then I'd go to Perplexity for more research based, and they do an excellent job with sourcing, right? Where you're getting your information. And then Claude does a pretty good job in sourcing where it gets its information such that it's your data or your files, right? Your information. But if you're relying on one tool or any tools to just, let me go back. Critical thinking is incredibly critical in using AI tools and infrastructure. Because if you don't know what to ask, you do not know what you don't know. You don't know how to ask questions to make sure that you're validating and verifying. And I think eventually, and I know there are physiological effects, right, on the brain. The brain is physically impacted by using AI and not thinking for yourself. You can see the changes in math when you're looking at a scan or an MRI or a CAT scan. But anyway, the folks can fall into the pit of intellectual laziness. Period. I don't need to expand on that. If you're not challenging yourself or pushing the machine to challenge itself, you'll hit a plateau. Right.
Completely agree.
Yeah. And I have a saying, you can't throw sugar on poop.
Yep.
Think about it. And at the end of the day, we have the power. I do not believe we'll end up in the matrix. Only if you allow it. We have the power. So on the consent piece, I've been tracking this for some time. Do you remember when Google will, and they still do, they would scrape your email 15 years ago? And then in turn, sell you ads or push ads up that are Google related. I always believe that there should be a revenue share between between mining my data and capitalizing or, monetizing my data, finding like entities or like users, and then using my information to engage other people and then eventually acquire them because they might like 3 out of the 5 things that I like. So there's a form of consent in that. And I don't think we've had much of it till late, thanks to federal legislation and governance by the white hats. The organizations actually do the right thing in giving you the option to choose how you want your data to be used. And then they'll make an update and then they'll slip it back in and then your data's up for grabs again. So I say all that to say, don't be intellectually lazy. Challenge the system, challenge yourself, and use critical thinking skills. Think of the scientific method. And it takes a couple of extra steps, but it's better than going down a path where you can't think for yourself or you're putting out the wrong information. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, Arin. What I was gonna say, you said you can't put sugar on. I was gonna say I'm a New Yorker, so I was gonna say, you put doo-doo in, you get, that's what you get out. So that's another way of saying it, right? But I think you brought up a great point, which is when this panel was about AI safety and really AI, artificial intelligence, right? The frontline defense, whether you are using AI as an individual or you're using it on an enterprise level or somewhere in between, the first line of defense for artificial intelligence and keeping it safe is human intelligence. So that means being smart about what you put in and realizing what you choose to put in, or where you choose to let the AI draw data from, scrape data from, is going to affect your output. But also an important part that both Jay and Ara brought up, and is that it's also about the prompts, right? Because, you know, the prompt matters, and all prompts are not created equal. Very practical example, you know, a lot of my practice involves mergers and acquisitions. So people buying and selling companies, right? And so that has gotten, because the VC market has gotten a bit tight, a lot of attorneys that used to do startup work and startup financings are now trying to move over and do this kind of work that I do, which is a little different. And, you know, they're encouraged and emboldened by, oh, I can just use AI to help me, to teach me what I don't know. And that's true. I have used the same way that I used for my mom to help her on her journey to become a doula. Hey, where can we get a playbook? I've done it for other areas of law that aren't my strong part. But, you know, the thing is like, if, you know, two people are using the same AI, right? The person who has a bit more intelligence or experience or knowledge in crafting the prompt is going to have a better output than the person who doesn't. So real example, I was doing a deal with an attorney who, it became very clear he didn't have as much experience with the type of transaction that we were doing. Again, it's fine, as long as, you know, for me, it's about getting to a good closing for all of our clients. But it started getting annoying because the things he was saying to me, they were always like almost right, but then they were a little off. And it became clear that this gentleman was using AI. And so, yes, and he was using AI that I use. He was using Perplexity, but the prompts matter. So he doesn't have enough context or experience to know what is a good prompt for, hey, if this type of contract, you know, part of the contract, what are some good examples of responses to the other attorney? That's what he was doing. He doesn't have enough context to even prompt it well. So the data you choose and you start with matters, and also you, the person. So I always say the rise of AI should have everyone reading, studying, attending panels and webinars like this more, not less, because at the end of the day, how are you going to sort the data and the outputs if you don't have any baseline in your own human intelligence? So that's the first part, right? Human intelligence is the first line of defense. And the second part, Ara, thank you for bringing it up. They always say, right, when something is free, if a company is giving you something for free, then what's the product? You're the product. So when you think about AI and you think about, you know, whether it's your Gmail, oh, Google's free. Yeah, it is free because they're taking your information and they're selling it and they're making money off of you. And to Ara's point, you're not getting a cut. Guess what? AI is no different. You are the product. Your information is the product. But hold on, especially for, you know, I do work with some creatives, my creative clients out there. And even for myself, when I'm writing, this is a really good article. I think, you know, let me put it in AI to clean it up. I'm careful about what I put in AI because, hold on, when you know it's good data because it's yours, and you put it in, you've solved one problem, but now you've put it into this black box of AI. You don't know what the AI is doing with your data. If you're like most of us, you just use the AI and it's free. And so you're not looking at the terms and conditions and seeing, you know, what are they doing with my data? Where is it stored? How is it stored? Because that'll affect, you know, if you're putting personal information in there, or for example, as attorneys, we can't put client information in the AI because we may be violating our confidentiality. So it's important not just how you prompt, but also think about where is that information being stored, your information being stored. Just the last piece is, you know, I have an AI note taker. Even in this meeting, we have it set up so before meetings with clients, we get their consent and let them know that we're using an AI note taker. And we start off every call. Some of you have had calls with me, so you know this. We start off with saying, hey, I use an AI note taker. Is it okay if we let it in? And also, because I have actually reviewed the terms of service and the privacy policy and have an idea of what Perplexity or Fathom is doing with my data, there are still situations where we kick it out of the room because we don't trust it with our data because breaches happen. So the key thing to me is human intelligence and how you prompt the data that you use, and being smart about what they're doing with your personal information or other people's personal information is the first line of defense.
You know, I really appreciate how you mentioned, essentially you're talking about accountability. It's a wild west right now, and governance is an up and coming thing, right? Entity. What does governance mean? Someone who's providing the service will be able to set a set of rules and make sure we are monitoring usage. in that accountability, people will end up, or organizations could either end up like a Sears or Toys R Us when they're not adapting, right? Based on rules and compliance that are surfacing, and then eventually the market will self-correct. That's it. You'll be locked out. So if you're relying on if you're relying to Denzel's point, if you're relying on outputs that do not that you're not checking, that's the theme, right, of this conversation, that you are absolutely not validating, that is a precedent that will scale into the danger zone, because it's going to change. The AI climate, I have a hunch it's going to happen this year. There's going to be a few bubbles bursting at a local level, at a state level, within ourselves, right, where we find ourselves wrong. But ultimately, that accountability, that responsibility will be forced on the people, will be forced on the employee, will be forced on the organization. And it's happening now in companies, regulated environments. I work in a regulated environment. My job is to protect people's data, but I have a 0 PHI policy for direct meds when it comes to AI. We don't know who the patient is. We don't care what they are, who they are. We have an ID that is different, that maps to another ID and into the actual database that we have secured, and then we just look at information, demographics, behaviors, and that's eventually you're going to need to be that clean cut when it comes to using AI, again, at an individual level, but ultimately organizations, and those who don't adopt will lose. You will end up in the camp of Sears and Toys R Us. One of the things that, and I'll wrap up in a second, like one of the things that we do at Mass Labs, which is my consultancy, is speak with private equity, venture capitalists, and family offices, and like, you want to adopt AI, but how is that going to resonate across your portfolio? What is that set of guardrails? To Javon's point, where are the guardrails? How do you wash, rinse, repeat, and protect? How do you scale? Are you flexible enough? How's your infrastructure flexible enough? Or is it to scale with compliance as governance has a greater presence? So I can geek out on that all day, but it's coming. Look at the gaps. Look where, okay, this is too easy. It doesn't last. You know, look at Netscape. Look at AOL. Look at Explorer, and so on. You know, now you can't. Now you have to pay for everything. But
You brought me back with the Netscape.
I was in high school.
I think I was in middle school. Let's just age ourselves.
It was so hard. I remember sitting at the computer, like, how do I use this? I don't know. Like, what do you do with the computer, with the internet?
What do you mean? Just press buttons and see what happens. You know, that's what I did. I survived. We are coming towards the end. If anybody that is watching wants to ask any questions, feel free to put it on the chat. But we'll end with, final thoughts from our panelists, the best practices and recommendations. Some of it's already discussed and mentioned here. Denzel, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I know a big part of my talking here has been about, the risk, the horror stories, because I see them regularly, deal with them regularly. But I really do think that, artificial intelligence has potential to be beneficial to humankind. And I don't think that that's a superlative thing. I do think that, for it to really reach its potential, though, we've got to deal with some of these risks. And part of that is even, we talk about bias. I think it's important that we have conversations like this. I mentioned private equity. Most of my clients are in the private equity and VC space. So, but then they're going in, they're buying, these mom and pop businesses, and they're wanting to bring AI to these businesses. And that's a great thing, right? We're getting technology to rural areas, to places. And and that aren't necessarily the tech hubs like Silicon Valley, Austin, pick your, New York to a lesser extent, right? And so that's a good thing. But what I would say is, don't be scared of AI. Be cautious of AI, question it, but definitely don't let the one of the risks here, we're talking about AI safety. One of the risks that are mentioned is that you're too scared and you let fear paralyze you, and you miss the opportunity to really learn this, right? The same way that people were slow with the internet and now, or phones, and like now, my 7-year-old daughter knows how to use the internet and the phone just naturally, intuitively. That's going to be what the case with the younger generation in AI. So don't be scared. Those of us who are a little bit older, have a little gray, don't be scared to use AI, but question it. And then the last thing is, same thing I tell my private equity guys who want to go and layer AI, slap AI on a mom and pop business. If you have a low tech business or a startup, or you're new to AI, yes, definitely start playing with different versions and learn it. But also, you may need to do basic things to get yourself ready for AI. Like, for example, everything that's in paper, it needs to be digital, because the AI is not going to work with your notebooks and folders and stuff. So I would just say, high level, the protection against AI is human intelligence, and the opportunity, one of the biggest risks, is you not actually exploring it and learning how it can work for you.
Okay.
So one of the things I would like to reiterate again is just when it comes to AI, paying attention to whether you're using AI or leveraging AI, and getting creative in how you're utilizing it. So many of us, we use Google to find information. And so a lot of times that's how AI is being used. But there's other ways and other opportunities for you to get creative, and to think critically, and to use AI to help you think critically about different decisions and ideas. So one of the things that I love to do is I will go to ChatGPT and I'll ask it, I'll tell it, hey, I'm thinking about this. Can you ask me questions that'll help me sort out my perspective or help me process this idea? And so instead of it giving me information, it's asking me questions to help me reflect within myself. And so I think it's really important, like Denzel said, to have an understanding of what you're using and using it ethically. And I also think it's important to realize that we are at the beginning stages of AI. There's a bunch of tools already, but we're in a space where I was talking to my older brother who he works in cybersecurity, and he works with AI. And one of the things we were talking about is the fact that sometimes the people creating AI, they have in mind for it to be used for one thing, something specific. But as people use it, we're the ones who decide how it's going to be used going forward, because they will adapt to what it is we're deciding to do with the AI. So taking that into perspective, paying attention to how it's being used around you, how you're being told to use it, but also if you have a creative mind and you feel like getting creative, do that and use the guardrails, ask the questions, and always go back to that critical component of asking it to challenge whatever you're thinking. And I think that'll leave you in a way better place.
That's amazing. Thank you, Jay. And Aria?
Final words. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for it. I believe in the white hats, right? And what is a white hat? Someone who, whether it's an org or an individual, just doing the right thing around AI, and just like ideally moving from experimentation into intentional governance. A few years ago, the dominant question in AI was, can we build this? Now people are asking, like, how should we build this? Should we deploy it this way? Who does it impact? How do we monitor? How do we monitor it? How do we correct it? Correcting it is key, right? And I believe that this evolution is happening in a meaningful way. We just can't let up. We cannot let up in doing the right things. I've spent years translating machine learning systems into real world applications, and recommending next best step, and recommendation engines, and large scale platform reform. What I've learned is that AI, it's not inherently good or bad. And that's the part, the big bad wolf in the room, that people, those who don't understand it or fear it, tend to see. And at the end of the day, it amplifies our choices, our design choices. And it's interesting to see what people say when others aren't in the room, right? It amplifies the data. The bias is scaled. It means that the human layer and decisions on how the systems are trained and deployed and governed matters more than ever. So I'm hopeful. I think these types of panels help people understand the risk and the responsibility behind using artificial intelligence, but ultimately, like what motivates me is the gap between usage and awareness, and how most people interact without even realizing how their inputs shape the outputs. We have the power, and how their data persists, right? And models influence the information that they see. So but the gap can close. The literacy is growing. Again, it goes back to responsibility and accountability and not letting up. If not, it will self-correct. The market will correct us. The government will correct us. Organizations will correct us. And yeah, just keep the conversation going. Pay it forward where you can. Learn from your mistakes and educate others. So that's my outlook on what's to come, and hopefully I'm right. Hopefully I'm right. My glass is half full on this one.
I love that. Yeah, and hopefully the people correct this. The people can go to the lobbyists and the politicians and help push those regulations, which I highly recommend. Thank you all. We are over time. Thank you all for your time, your attention, your expertise on such an important topic in today's day and age. So this will be posted by the end of the week onto YouTube, or to our YouTube channel at the Lioness Instincts, at the Lioness Instincts on YouTube. And for those that attended, we'll send up a follow-up email. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.